Hey everyone, Walter Bowne here, talking about Chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. As always, lots going on in The Great Gatsby. Chapter 2, you can't have the wealth of West Egg and East Egg without the poverty of the Valley of Ashes. So in order to get to heaven, you got to get through hell. So to get from the eggs to Manhattan, you got to pass through Astoria or, this Valley of Ashes. So there's this, so let's take a look at the language that Fitzgerald conjures up here. A lot of it from World War I. Okay, this Valley of Ash, a fantastic farm. Think of the irony here. Okay, ash is not growing, but yet here it's growing like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke and transcendent effort. Men who've moved dimly and already crumbling. Okay, so these are the walking dead. They're already crumbling through the powdery air. Think of this as the World War I battlefields, all right? A line of gray cars. Look at all this imagery. Gray, ghastly, creaking, ash gray men swarming, leaden spades. This all conjures up images of hell, all right? And which screens their obscure operations from your sight. Think about all of the imagery, the light imagery in Chapter 1 with Daisy and brightness and sunshine, and now these men can't even see the light. And this is where the Wilsons live. And above the Valley of Ashes, we have the disembodied eyes of T.J. Eckelberg, right? Which is a road sign, it's a billboard, and it's just a pair of spectacles looming with some eyeballs, all right? Yellow spectacles, blue eyeballs. That blue-yellow will be very significant in the novel, as we will see. And they're a yard high. They don't look out of the face, but out of spectacles, okay? Let's move, and then it's just there. Now, we can really take a look at, is God in the 1920s been reduced to a billboard? Does this mean God is looking over a world that he can no longer control or has removed himself from, like the idea of God is dead? Or is he still looking over the wasteland, over the decadence? And this will come into play later in the novel with Wilson, okay? And with all the characters, actually. Think about if whatever you do, especially if it's nefarious, especially if it's immoral, illegal, you hit a jewel, you're drinking too much, and if you think God is watching you at all times, you might say, okay, I'm not going to hit that jewel, right? I'm not going to take a puff of that marijuana cigarette. If you think this God, but if you think God is just now an advertisement and there's no morality, there's no heaven and hell, it's just life and whatever, then maybe everything's up for grabs. Okay, so the eyes of T.J. Eckelberg, one of the major symbols of The Great Gatsby, along with the green light that we saw from Chapter 1 with Gatsby outstretching his arms to. So those two are huge, controlling symbols in the novel. All right, so we meet the Wilsons here, okay? Think about how crazy it is if your cousin's husband takes you to meet his mistress, all right? Your allegiance is with your cousin. That's family. But this guy, he grabs him, he takes him it says it bordered on violence. He tanked up. He was drinking right here. He was drinking at lunch. He had determined that he wanted my company that bordered on violence. We know Tom Buchanan is a violent person. Look what he did to Daisy in Chapter 1, hurting her thumb, right? It's all bruised. And his shoes are creaking, or his boots are just straining under the muscle. This guy is a violent person, all right? And then, of course, at the end of Chapter 2, he beats up his girlfriend, Myrtle, and busts her nose, right? So Tom, there's nothing else for for Nick to do, and Tom realizes, you have nothing to do, you're coming with me, I want you to beat my girl, all right? So they go to Wilson's garage, right here, George Wilson. George, think of George Washington. Woodrow Wilson. So here is the all-American man, the all-American president who's been reduced to an ash man, okay? One of these like poor white trash kind of people that we'll be reading about. And he is trying to get the American dream. He has his own garage, right? And this is where Myrtle and George live. And they live in hell, practically. So he comes up. He's trying to do business with Wilson and Tom. And Wilson has no idea that Tom is sleeping with his wife, right? And it's pretty interesting when you see here how Myrtle Wilson is described. She was in her middle 30s, faintly stout, but carried her surplus flesh sensuously as some women can. Now, Tom is upper class, dating a woman, not dating, okay, he's sleeping with her, using her for sex. And he's definitely in the lower classes here. She thinks this is her ticket out of the lower classes. She needs to get out of the Valley of Ashes, and she thinks Tom is her ticket. We know, as anyone should know, that's just stupid, all right? But sometimes, people delude themselves, all right? She is not nearly as attractive as Daisy. She is not classy. She's none of those things, yet Tom uses her to get what he wants, okay? And then this is very interesting here. Her nerves of her body were continually smoldering. All right, so it's like the ash men here with all the ash on them. If you walk around with ash, and if you're Catholic, you get the ashes on your forehead, that's to remind you of death, right? That we will all turn to ash one day. But here, even Myrtle is smoldering. And if you have any idea about foreshadowing, you should be like, oh, what's going to happen to Myrtle? All right. So he bossed Wilson around. He's so dumb, right? He gets chairs, and then he gets back, and then they're gone, right? Tom is going to take Myrtle to New York for the Love Shack. They have their own apartment. He has so much money, he can afford an apartment in a nice place in New York and conduct his drinking and sexcapades, all right? And then even Tom recognizes this is a terrible place, exchanging a frown with Dr. Eckelberg. Awful. It does her good to get away. He justifies his adultery by saying it does her good. It's okay. And then doesn't her husband object? Wilson, he thinks he goes to see his sister. He's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive. All right. Again, maybe he is already the Walking Dead. All right. So Tom and his girl and I went up together to New York, not quite together, for Mrs. Wilson sat discreetly in another car. So they're going together. But Mrs. Wilson's going to be in another car because Tom, he says, I'm an East Egger after all. I don't want to be seen with such a woman. I'll have sex with her, but I don't want people to see that I'm actually with her. Can you imagine? This guy is a horrible, horrible human being, all right? But here we have Fitzgerald also commenting on up here, the Town Tattle. She bought it, it's a gossip magazine, like the National Enquirer, okay? So these are phony people, all right? Now, she's no longer poor because she's with Tom, and Tom buys her one of these expensive dogs. And notice how she changes her attitude. Now that she's out of the Valley of Ashes, away from her husband, who she despises, George Wilson, right? Now the money has corrupted her. Now at the party, she orders people around. Oh, it's so hard to get good help these days. And her eyes look at the apartment as if she owns it and judges it and evaluates it and is constantly criticizing, everybody and things that are not the way they should be. All right. So he gets her this dog. This is important. This police collar, not the dog collar and the dog, it's there, but it will come up later. All right. Just think about that. It's foreshadowing. Good writers put clues into the story that will come up later. All right. And here's another thing that Tom says. He's like, that's not an Airedale. That's a bitch. All right. It's a woman, but of course he's going to use vulgar language. And he says, here, get yourself more 10 dogs. He knows he's being taken. He knows this isn't a purebred, but he doesn't want to disappoint Myrtle. In a way, she's a kind of a de facto prostitute. instead of paying her like $100 or $50 or whatever the exchange was back in the 1920s, you know, not nearly that much, but it's like just an exchange of goods. I'll buy you stuff. Just have sex with me. But Myrtle, not being very bright, thinks that this is her ticket out of poverty. All right. And Mrs. was, oh, I think it's cute. That dog will cost you $10. All right. So they're going up Fifth Avenue. If you know anything about New York, you know Fifth Avenue. Yeah, we're in the wealthy part. And now it's warm and soft and pastoral. So we've gotten through hell, the Valley of Ashes. Now we're seeing the white sheet turn the corner. All right. Now we're seeing 158th Street and the white cake of the apartment buildings here. Again, look at the imagery. We have the gray men who are the walking dead, and now we're in heaven. Now it's New York, and it's regal, all right? Regal, that adjective meaning royalty, king and queen, and we meet the Mr. and Mrs. McKees, okay? This is Fitzgerald's way to criticize the phonies of the 1920s. These two are dilettantes, or at least Mr. McKee is. He's a photographer who thinks he's great. But can you imagine going to a party and and a person showing you like who you don't even know, like, this is my portfolio of the stuff. And, oh, and this and that. And I was in Montauk, and I call this Montauk the Gulls and Montauk the Point. That is satire. I mean, he is making fun of these people. Mrs. McKee has redrawn her face. It's almost like you've taken away your face, and then now you just created a new face and painted your eyebrows at rakish angles, right? So these people are phony as a $3 bill, right? Again, Town Tattle is here. We've got the Cheerful Sun. So what we have going on here is, again, the drinking. They need to go to apartment to drink. Of course, as soon as they get there, Tom and Myrtle disappear and have sex in a bedroom. And think of poor Nick. He's here with Catherine, the sister of Myrtle, who's a horrible person. She thinks they are going to get a divorce because Daisy's Catholic. Daisy is not Catholic. She's deluding herself. And then poor Nick here is left with these weirdos, and he's just drinking. He's only been drunk twice in his life. And that's important because a lot of people are going to be drinking, but Nick can't be a drinker because he's the narrator. We have to trust him. He's the moral voice. He's the clarity in the story, all right? And he's the one who will be making the judgments, even though he says he's not going to judge in the very beginning of the book, all right? So the party gets more and more crazy. And, of course, at the end, Tom busts Myrtle's nose when she says, Daisy, 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 smack, right? And then, of course, Myrtle changes her outfit. Actually, Fitzgerald's original word is that she changed her clothes. He scratched it out. Believe me, I have his manuscript. I see it. I paid a lot of money for it. And he put in costume. So she, in a way, is on a stage. She's not wearing clothes. She's wearing a costume. A costume. And she changes her costumes. She said, I married him because I thought he was a gentleman, George. And he says, I was crazy. He had to borrow the suit that I got married in. All right. Again, bottle of whiskey. The second one was in constant demand. Okay. And so the drinking continues. And then we have the violence here. Again, that was prophesied. Is going to be coming out even more later in the book. All right. And the weird thing is, everyone thinks this is strange. We go from, okay, Fitzgerald here is writing as if someone's drunk. Nick is drunk. He doesn't remember how he got here. He remembers being in an elevator, but then ... that's an ellipses. Now he's standing by this guy's bed. Now, if you have a friend and you're both been drinking, you might want to help your friend in your dorm get to bed. It doesn't mean you're gay. There's nothing gay happening here, guys, okay? He's in his underwear. He's helping this guy. And then the guy is still so drunk, he's still showing his portfolio of his pictures. Beauty and the Beast. Loneliness. Okay? And then he wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the train. All right? After a crazy, crazy night with Tom Buchanan.